Hey guys, what's up? It's me, MC Matador here, and today I am bringing you another countdown video. This is probably the first one I've done in over a year, and it's been a little while. Part 8 of my Coaster Bonanza series went up 2 weeks ago, and since then I've been dealing with midterm exams here at my first semester at university. So, I've been kind of busy and having to study and do tests and all that, like a normal student who wants to do well, and YouTube takes a back burner to my studies and all that jazz. But since this will be my first countdown, possibly my only countdown of 2019, from the largest park I visited during this past summer, Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. There are a total of 8 coasters in this park, and I've ridden almost all of them. I'll be counting down the coasters in the park from best to worst, worst to best. Jeez, that's a typo. My mind autopiloted on that one. Sorry, worst to best. 8 to 1. Like, I don't even need to explain how a countdown works. You've been watching countdowns. If you've been here a while, you know how I do my countdowns, and you should know how sane people do countdowns if they're actually counting down, as the name implies. Enough with logistics. Let's just get into this. Number 8 is Whistle Punk Chaser. Yeah, this is, I said I didn't ride, or I rode most of the coasters at Dollywood. I rode all the big stuff because I don't ride kiddie coasters for credits. I don't credit whore like some people, and I don't think there was a single coaster. In some parks, there were coasters bad enough to where a potential generic kiddie coaster or unique kiddie coaster could outdo a really bad ride, kind of like maybe 2015 over Georgia, where even though I didn't ride what was once Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner Express or Wile E. Coyote, I forget what it was called, Canyon Blaster, I don't know. I think it was Wile E. Coyote Canyon Blaster. What's now Joker Funhouse Coaster. That one was probably better than the now renovated Ninja, which was a Vekoma MK1200 custom looper that is pretty dang awful and is despised by the locals, or was when it was still around. Whistle Punk Chaser just will be the distinct last place entry. I don't think there's any coaster bad enough to where this generic yet newer kiddie coaster could outdo it. It does look kind of nice though, the orange and black. It's a nice color scheme. I'll give it that. It's also right next to a mediocre drop tower that was built in the same year. Moving on, we have Mystery Mine. The theming on this thing is top notch, and it's probably one of the best themed rides in America, up there with, say, Verbolten. But I just cannot overlook that there were some really jarring transitions on this. And the headbanging was, oof. This definitely felt like an early 2000s Gerstlauer, much along the lines of Typhoon and Wildsnivet in Europe. This thing definitely felt prototypical, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first Gerstlauer Eurofighter built in the entirety of the Western Hemisphere. It even uses that very thin track style, rather than the triangular track similar to what Gerstlauer uses now for things like Monster, or even older things like SpongeBob SquarePants Bikini Bottom Plunge, or Rock Bottom Plunge. This thing does have some positives, I'm going to say that. I do really like the theming. The theming was excellent, although it got a little hot in the theming rooms because it was dark, there was fire effects, and it was also, 90 degrees when I went there, because it was summer in Tennessee. That's more of a climatory nitpick, and this double inversion at the end is excellent. Coming out of the first barrel roll, going into the dive loop, you get some excellent hang time. Probably the most hang time in the entire Southeast if I were to take a gander at it. But this thing definitely is old. It's been around for probably 15 years at this point, and it's rough for the most part, especially that section after the first drop. It just kind of crests over hills, over banks, laterals, and just kind of meanders about before going into that second part of the theming, where everything's on fire. It's really, that part is particularly janky and really not enjoyable in the slightest. Really, the inversions are the best part of the ride, and the vertical lift hills with the screens in them are pretty unique. I mean, this thing is essentially a mixed bag, but the negatives outweigh the positives. That's why it's the worst big coaster in the park, and the ops are awful. Moving on, we had Tennessee Tornado, the last ever aero looper built, if I remember correctly, or at least the last mainstream one in the States. This was built in 1999. Mind you, other coasters that were built in 99 that have gone on to be famous are things like Apollo's Chariot, Afterburn at Carowinds, and Raging Bull, my true pride and soul, over here in Illinois. And they decided to go with an Arrow. I'm not sure if B&M or Intamin were like fully booked for that time, because these two coaster companies were the industry standard come the late 90s, and Arrow had basically just faded out of the market almost entirely. They're about to take on the ambitious project that was X, and that flopped. And really, this thing flopped as well. It definitely is one of the best, if not the best, Arrow looper is out there. And it has its definite positives. I think its biggest asset is that the positive G's this thing pulls in some places are intense. I grade out at a couple points in this ride. The positive G's, as well as the terrain interaction, is fantastic, but just there's a lot of typical Arrow shortcomings. The trains in particular. If you're not riding in the very front and you're a 6'2" lanky dude like me, you're going to be banging your knees on a sit-down coaster. The trains are very cramped. The operations, they physically can only run one train on this thing because the brake run is so short. So this thing often has a way longer queue than it ever deserves. Like what should have been a 5-minute queue turned into a 15-20 minute queue for my first and only ride on this thing. I really only needed one on this in the front, and that's really it. If you want me to ride this again, give me some advice, but heck. And headbanging. Don't forget the headbanging, because why wouldn't it be an Arrow without terrible restraints that are like don't accommodate people with tall the restraints are terrible for tall people. I'm tall and broad-shouldered, and the restraints came down pretty hard on my shoulders, and B&M's and Intamins are a lot more accommodating OTSRs for tall people. Basically, this thing is inferior to almost every other Intamin or B&M built in the 90s. And if this thing were built in a typical 90s fashion, let's say it'd be replaced with a B&M style invert, much like rival B&M invert in the southeast, Afterburn, or later Montu. And just, my goodness. I don't really take a side with Tennessee Tornado. I don't hate Arrow, don't get me wrong. I very much appreciate their revolutions and their innovation in the theme park industry. But in a day of B&M and Gerstlauer and Mock Rides and Intamin and RMC, Arrow is essentially obsolete in almost any sense of the word. Ingenuity 20 years ago is obsolescent today. Like, look at the tech industry for any of that. Moving on, we have number 5, DraganFlyer. Halfway through the list, we get to the new for 2019 craft. A short, compact, yet satisfying ride fit for families and riders of all ages. This thing honestly has a really good complex. It's 14 by 2, so 14 rows, 2 per row. And there's a very distinct ride style when I rode in the front and the back. Or I don't think I rode in the front, but I do know this. I do know that there was a distinct style. If you rode in the front, you're going to get a more graceful ride, and families with younger children should ride in the front. But if you're a coaster enthusiast, I think that you would much enjoy the back. The drop and that first overbank are snappy and quite fast-paced in the back row, which is where I did most of my bidding on my 3 rides in this thing. Or was it 2? I think it was 3. And also, this thing is nestled in one of my favorite theme park lands of all time, Wildwood Grove. I love Wildwood Grove. There's not really enough there to where, it's not a whole area. It's just a kiddie coaster, a couple family rides, but the atmosphere is one where I can really if I ever had an area where I could just sit around, drink some water or soda, and just have a relaxing time listening to the ambiance, it'd be Wildwood Grove. And I kind of covered this in my synopsis. But due to this thing's ceiling of performance, due to its existence as a family inverted coaster, this thing can only be so good. It'd be a 10 out of 10 if it was doing what it was intended to do, but in terms of a macrocosmos scheme of coasters, it's just right here in the middle. It's good, but not good enough. Moving on, we have Fire Chaser Express. This thing is honestly a sleeper hit. I really like the modest yet satisfying forces this thing provided, and made by Gerstlauer, so pretty underrated manufacturer here in the States. Fantastic theme, fantastic operations, a story, tells a really good story at that. You get, your volunteer firefighters with your fire station number 9, or is it firehouse number 5, I don't know. I forget which one it is, I think it's number 9. Or 9 2/3. Is that Harry Potter or Polar Express? I don't know pop culture. I'm just making myself look like an idiot. back on Fire Chaser Express, this thing tells a fantastic story. Volunteer firefighters, and you have to deal with Crazy Charlie, who runs a gas station next to a fireworks shack, and the fireworks go off, which lights the gas tank on fire and sends the riders in a backwards launch down the back end of the course. And there's, 2 launches and a chain lift in this thing. And this thing, it's just got everything. Even though it's a family coaster, this thing has everything, and is a smash hit for families, demonstrating the longer wait times that I had to wait in. Not as long as Lightning Rod or Mystery Mine, but this thing for sure had one of the longer wait times, and probably the longest of any of the family coasters there. Even longer than Wild Eagle and Thunderhead, which will be coming up shortly. And I think Fire Chaser Express is one of the best family coasters in existence, along with its neighbor DraganFlyer and sleeper hit over in California, Sierra Sidewinder. Moving on, we have number 3, the aforementioned Wild Eagle. Now, just as a disclaimer, this thing, it really could be better. I mean, B&M wing coasters as a whole never really seemed to do it for me. I always prefer dives or flyers or inverts or anything really else in a wing coaster. Floorless, sit down, hyper, giga, pseudo hyper. I haven't ridden any of those, but still. Wild Eagle fits into this category, just wing coasters being good, but never good enough. But this thing actually kept it pretty close to its competitors, mainly X-Flight and Gatekeeper being pretty close in comparison. You know, Chicago and Cleveland, and then Pigeon Forge, or Chicago, Sandusky, and Pigeon Forge. The drop in the back row, which is, Wild Eagle, I believe, is one of the only wing coasters in the States, if not the only wing coaster in the States, other than Thunderbird, with a standard drop instead of a wing over drop, and which was surprisingly forceful. You got some good eject floater, kind of flagector airtime in the back. And the ride, and of course, interacted really well being perched on top of a mountain. You can hear and see this thing all over the park, and it looks beautiful. The hilly terrain and the mountainous terrain really interacts with the ride fabulously. And it does distinguish itself from other Midwestern wings, yet doesn't really beat them. It's just kind of lost in the shuffle. This thing is just another wing coaster for me. It's really good in terms of the park's lineup, and really it gives them that modern steel looper that many parks would crave for, especially one of this quality, but it just doesn't match the prowess of other coasters that could have been built. Inverts, dives, floorless, flyers. A flyer especially would have been awesome in the mountain, but hey, I'm going to respect the fact that this thing even exists. It's still a great ride, and I definitely enjoy my time on it, although limited, because we still have 2 rides that are considerably better than this. First of 2 being Thunderhead. Generally, GCI coasters that were built after Lightning Racer, not Lightning Run, or I don't know. Back on track, GCI coasters built after Lightning Racer, Hershey Park, generally are really good for me. I've ridden Roar and Wildcat, and neither of those 2 really do it for me. Roar, Six Flags America, for context. But this one is fantastic, even though it was built, 15 or so years ago, or mid-2000s. This thing has negative and lateral forces in everywhere. You can see them coming, or they sometimes surprise you with an element that you just can't see coming. You might be going up into what looks like an overbank, but you get a pop of airtime, and that happens more than once. It's fast-paced, balanced experience that generally is overshadowed by other GCIs, as well as the locals. Seriously, in late July, I was there for 2 days, never waited more than 20 minutes for Thunderhead. Compare it to Fire Chaser Express, Mystery Mine, and Lightning Rod, and those things were pulling over 45 minutes apiece. Lightning Rod almost 2 hours, but we'll get to that one, as the number 1 coaster, indeed, is Lightning Rod. Not my favorite coaster of all time, but definitely really high up there. It's a unique masterpiece that offers an amazing blend of everything RMC has to offer. Airtime, laterals, and terrain. Lots and lots of fantastic terrain interaction. You literally can't see the main body of this coaster from anywhere in the park. It's just, there's a road between 2 hills and it runs on the other side of the road. You really just drive under the lift hill if you're taking the camp bus that I took to get there, or it's I forget, it's like a bus line. It's the Fun Bus or the Black Bear Trail or whatever it's called. It's definitely, you can see this thing, and despite its maintenance issues, this thing did open up a little late both days I was there, but never really went down much after that, despite, then again, I also had multiple weather delays. which gave me an excuse to enjoy the best ride of Dollywood at all, which is not even a ride, it's the cinnamon bread. God save the cinnamon bread, and send about 6 million of those to me. Either way, back on Lightning Rod, the thing is phenomenal. The launch lift hill, despite going 40-45 miles an hour, is intense. The drop in the back is absolutely phenomenal. The wave turn is absolutely massive. The quad down, down the hill, is legendary and will be one of the best coasters, as well as one of the best airtime buffets in the entire area. I mean, this thing is the obvious best choice for best ride in the park, and it definitely is one of America's elite roller coasters, and will be for a while to come. Even with things like Iron Gwazi and Texas Stingray going up this year, this thing will remain elite. And that about does it. I also do want to say for Lightning Rod that I'm actually around campus today for my 3 classes. I was actually going around wearing long pants and a Lightning Rod shirt. The merch selection was pretty limited, but I did get a Lightning Rod shirt for it being a fantastic coaster that lands itself in my current top 10. And I wore it around campus. I brought it with me. Some shirts didn't even get that honor, like my Banshee Diamondback hybrid shirt. My Maverick shirt surprisingly got snuffed. That's because I opted for Steel Vengeance. And just, I can only bring so much of me before it's a little excessive. I only need enough clothes to last me a week, maybe a week, 2 weeks, because I don't have a job yet. Because, well, I'm not going to go too much into my personal life. I just hope you have enjoyed this video. I also did want to put the tidbit that I did wear my Lightning Rod shirt today, but just to prove that I love this thing. It's not my favorite coaster of all time, like I said, but it definitely is a fantastic ride that is totally worth going way out from anywhere in the States or North America as a whole to ride. And Dollywood just keeps looking like it's going to go up and up and up. This thing should be on your radar. I'm fully expecting like 2 more roller coasters before 2025. So, yeah, that'll do it. I hope you guys have enjoyed my video. Feel free to like, comment, or subscription. And if you have any dissenting opinions or concurring opinions about my list, leave them in the comments below. I'd like to hear what you guys think. And overall, I hope you guys have a great insert unit of time here. We're about halfway through school. And, I'm actually over halfway through school now. Just overall, good luck with your endeavors throughout the rest of your semester. If you're not in school, then just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great, whatever you're doing. And as always, I wish you guys peace.